The reckoning arrives. The Galactic Dominion Empire had ruled for 7,000 years. Their fleets numbered in the tens of thousands, their subject species exceeded 400, and their territory stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. They were the undisputed masters of known space, and they had never known defeat. Every species that resisted was crushed. Every world that defied them was burned. Every civilization that dared to stand against the Empire learned the same bitter lesson. Resistance was futile, and submission was the only path to survival. The Empire's philosophy was simple and brutal. Strength determined worth. The strong commanded and the weak obeyed. For millennia, this doctrine had served them well. They expanded without opposition, conquering primitive worlds and advanced civilizations alike. Their military doctrine was perfected through countless wars. Their technology was refined through the forced labor of 1,000 enslaved species. They believed themselves invincible, eternal, and beyond challenge. Then they encountered humanity. Earth was an unremarkable world on the outer rim of the galaxy, home to a relatively young species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. The humans had established a handful of colonies on nearby systems, nothing that would draw attention from the galactic powers. They were curious, energetic, and somewhat naive about the true nature of the universe they had stepped into. They explored with enthusiasm, traded with neighboring species, and believed that reason and diplomacy could solve most conflicts. The Empire noticed them eventually, as they noticed all emerging species. The humans were classified as a potential subject race, suitable for integration into the Dominion's workforce. The evaluation was routine. The decision was made without ceremony or debate. Humanity would be conquered, their worlds would be claimed, and their people would serve. It was the natural order of things. The invasion of humanity's outer colonies came without warning. Imperial warships descended upon 3 human settlements in a single coordinated strike. The colonies were mining outposts and agricultural centers, lightly defended and unprepared for military assault. The humans tried to negotiate, sending desperate transmissions asking for dialogue, offering to discuss terms, pleading for their families and children. The Empire responded with orbital bombardment. 17 million humans died in those first attacks. Men, women, and children were vaporized in nuclear fire. Entire cities were reduced to radioactive glass. The survivors were rounded up and transported to labor camps on Imperial core worlds. The Empire broadcast images of the destruction across human space as a demonstration of power and a demand for immediate surrender. They expected humanity to capitulate within days, as so many species had before them. Instead, Earth went silent. Every human transmission ceased. Every colony went dark. Human ships retreated to their home system and vanished behind a communications blackout that was absolute and impenetrable. The Empire sent probe ships to investigate, but every vessel that crossed into human space never returned. Not destroyed, not captured, simply gone as if they had fallen into a void. The Empire sent larger fleets, and those too disappeared without a trace or a single distress signal. For 5 decades, humanity said nothing. They made no threats, issued no declarations, sent no ambassadors. The silence was complete and eerie. The Empire debated what it meant. Some believed humanity had destroyed itself in civil war or ecological collapse, as some primitive species did when faced with overwhelming trauma. Others speculated that humans had retreated into isolation, accepting their fate as a defeated people. A few voices in the Imperial Intelligence Service suggested something more concerning, that humanity was preparing, but these warnings were dismissed as paranoid speculation. The Empire moved on. Humanity was forgotten, relegated to a footnote in conquest records. New wars were fought, new species were subjugated, and the Dominion continued its eternal expansion. 50 years was nothing to an empire that measured its history in millennia. The humans were simply another failed species too weak to matter. Then the transmission came. It reached every corner of Imperial space simultaneously. Every communications network, every military channel, every civilian broadcast system, every personal device, all were hijacked in the same instant by a signal of impossible power and precision. The transmission overrode every security protocol, bypassed every firewall, and forced itself onto every screen and speaker across 500 worlds. The message was simple. A human face appeared, neither young nor old, neither male nor female in any way the Empire's many species could easily categorize. The humans' eyes were cold and calm, the expression carved from stone. When they spoke, the words were translated flawlessly into every known language of the Empire, delivered in a voice that carried no anger, no passion, no emotion at all, only absolute certainty. This is humanity's final warning to the Galactic Dominion Empire. 50 years ago, you murdered 17 million of our people. You destroyed our colonies. You took our families and made them slaves. You believed we would surrender or perish. You were wrong on both counts. We have spent these 50 years preparing. We have studied you. We have learned your weaknesses. We have built weapons you cannot comprehend and technologies you cannot counter. This message serves as your only opportunity for survival. You have one standard cycle to meet our demands. Release every human held in your labor camps. Return their remains to us with honor. Withdraw your forces from the territories you stole. Dismantle your military infrastructure in those sectors. If you comply, we will allow your empire to continue existing. If you refuse, we will burn your worlds to ash and scatter your fleets across the void. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is a statement of imminent reality. You attacked humanity without provocation. You murdered our innocent. You believed we were weak. Now you will learn the cost of that mistake. You have one cycle. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. Across the Empire there was stunned silence, followed by eruptions of rage, mockery, and disbelief. A species that had been silent for 50 years. A species the Empire had crushed in a single afternoon, now issued ultimatums. The arrogance was incomprehensible. The delusion was laughable. The Imperial High Command convened within hours. The council chamber on the throne world of Azkarath was a massive structure, designed to intimidate and inspire awe. Representatives from the Empire's ruling caste gathered, their forms ranging from insectoid to reptilian, to energy-based beings of pure thought. They were united in their contempt for humanity's message. Grand Admiral Thexorin, Supreme Commander of the Imperial fleets, slammed his armored appendage against the council table. His species had evolved as apex predators, and his every movement radiated controlled violence. "This is absurdity," he growled, his translator rendering his clicks and hisses into the common tongue. "A broken species of primitives dares to threaten the Dominion. They have no fleet capable of challenging even a single battle group. Their worlds are isolated and vulnerable. This transmission is desperation masquerading as strength." Several council members voiced agreement, their various forms of communication blending into a cacophony of derision. But not all voices joined the mockery. Strategist Prime Velix, an ancient being whose intellect was enhanced by cybernetic augmentation, spanning 3,000 years of service, remained silent. When the noise subsided, Velix spoke with deliberate care. "The humans went silent for 50 years, Velix said, the words measured and precise. In that time they made no attempts at communication, no efforts at diplomacy, no signs of activity beyond their home system. They repelled our probe ships and scout fleets without engaging in open combat. This suggests capability we did not anticipate. The sophistication required to hijack our entire communications network simultaneously is profound. No species in our records has achieved such a feat. I recommend caution." Grand Admiral Thexorin's eyes narrowed with contempt. "Caution? Against a species we defeated in a single engagement? Their silence means nothing. They hid because they were afraid. This transmission is a bluff designed to forestall the inevitable. I recommend we answer their warning with immediate military action. We will locate Earth and reduce it to rubble. Let that be our response to their arrogance," the Emperor himself finally spoke. His form was shrouded in shadows at the far end of the chamber, ancient and terrible. A being who had ruled for 2,000 years through cunning and ruthless pragmatism, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Send a fleet to human space. A large one, sufficient to overwhelm any defense they might have prepared. If they have built weapons as they claim, we will capture them and integrate them into our arsenal. If they have not, we will finish what we began 50 years ago. But send reconnaissance drones ahead. Felix's caution is noted, if not shared. Let us at least know what awaits our forces before they arrive." The decision was made. Within hours, the Empire assembled its response. A battle fleet of 300 warships, supported by carrier groups, siege platforms, and super-heavy dreadnoughts capable of cracking planets. It was overwhelming force, more than enough to sterilize a dozen worlds. The fleet would arrive at the edge of human space within 3 standard cycles. Well after humanity's ultimatum expired, the Empire would demonstrate once again the price of defiance. The reconnaissance drones were dispatched first, dozens of them, equipped with every sensor the Empire possessed. They crossed into human territory, their instruments scanning for fleet concentrations, defensive installations, anything that would indicate military preparation. They found nothing. No fleets, no stations, no defensive grids, just empty space and silent colonies. Then the drones stopped transmitting. All of them, simultaneously. Hours later, humanity's second transmission arrived. The same human face appeared on Imperial screens, but this time, the background had changed. Behind the human floated the wreckage of Imperial reconnaissance drones, their hulls torn apart with surgical precision. The human's expression remained neutral, almost bored. "You have made your choice," the human said simply. "Now face the consequences." The transmission ended. For a moment, nothing happened. Then across the Empire's border regions, sensors detected energy signatures of impossible magnitude. Spatial distortions appeared at 73 locations simultaneously, each one blooming like flowers of twisted space-time. From these distortions emerged ships, but they were not ships in any conventional sense. They were constructs of dark matter and folded dimensions, vessels that seemed to exist partially outside normal reality. Their hulls reflected no light. Their presence bent space around them. They moved without visible propulsion, accelerating to speeds that defied physics as the Empire understood it. There were thousands of them appearing from nowhere, arranged in perfect geometric formations that suggested not military might but mathematical precision. The Imperial border fleets scrambled to respond, but they were already too late. The human vessels did not fire conventional weapons. They did not launch missiles or energy beams. Instead, space itself seemed to collapse around Imperial ships. Warships imploded without explosions, crushed by gravitational anomalies that appeared and vanished in microseconds. Stations dissolved as their atomic bonds simply ceased to exist. Defense platforms turned to dust, their matter unraveling at the quantum level. The border world of Kelthera IV was a fortress, home to 17 billion Imperial citizens and protected by the largest defense grid in the outer sectors. It had never fallen to enemy attack in 4,000 years. The human fleet arrived in orbit within minutes of the first assault. They did not bombard the world. They did not land troops. They simply positioned themselves in a perfect sphere around the planet and activated a device. The world's star flickered. Its light dimmed, then vanished completely as if someone had switched off a lamp. Within hours, Kelthera IV was plunged into absolute darkness and freezing cold. The atmosphere began to snow, then froze solid. 17 billion lives ended not in fire, but in ice and darkness. The human fleet departed without comment, leaving the frozen tomb orbiting a dead star as a monument to the Empire's arrogance. Across Imperial space, panic spread like wildfire. The humans were not fighting a conventional war. They were demonstrating power that bordered on the godlike. Worlds that had stood for millennia fell in minutes. Fleets that had conquered hundreds of species were erased without firing a shot. And through it all, humanity said nothing. They simply advanced, system by system, executing their warning with methodical precision. The Empire finally understood. They had not awakened a primitive species. They had awakened something that had used 50 years not to hide, but to evolve beyond recognition. They had given humanity time to become something terrifying. And now, the reckoning had arrived. Part 2. The galaxy burns. The Imperial High Command watched their empire crumble in real time. The holographic displays in the council chamber on Azkarath showed spreading chaos across their territories. Red indicators marked fallen worlds. Yellow showed systems under attack, and the blue zones representing Imperial control shrank with every passing hour. What had taken 7,000 years to build was being systematically dismantled in a matter of weeks. Grand Admiral Thexerin stood before the tactical display, his armored form rigid with barely contained fury and, for the first time in his long military career, genuine fear. The 300-ship fleet he had dispatched to crush humanity never reached its destination. It had simply vanished. No distress signals, no wreckage, no survivors. 300 of the Empire's most advanced warships and their 50,000 crew members had been erased from existence as if they had never been. How? Thexoran demanded, his voice breaking with frustration. How does a species go from primitive spaceflight to this in 50 years? It is impossible. Evolution does not work this way. Technology does not advance this rapidly. What we are witnessing defies every principle of development and progress we have established. Across 400 conquered species, strategist, Prime Velix manipulated the holographic interface with practiced efficiency, pulling up analysis reports that offered no comfort. Our intelligence divisions have reconstructed what they believe occurred during humanity's silence. The humans did not simply develop new weapons. They appear to have undergone a fundamental transformation of their entire civilization and technological base. They abandoned conventional physics and engineering entirely. Every piece of wreckage we have recovered shows technology built on principles we do not understand. Matter that exists in multiple quantum states simultaneously, energy sources that draw power from dimensions we cannot detect, propulsion systems that manipulate the fabric of space-time itself. Another council member, a gaseous being whose form shifted within a containment field, spoke with what translators rendered as horror. They have broken the fundamental laws, the universal constants that govern reality. How can we fight an enemy that operates outside the rules that bind all other life? Velix's response was clinical, devoid of emotion. We cannot, not with our current capabilities. Every engagement has resulted in absolute imperial defeat. Our weapons pass through their ships without effect, as if firing at ghosts. Their weapons disintegrate our vessels at the molecular level. We have documented at least 17 distinct categories of human weaponry, none of which operate on principles our scientists can comprehend. They are not fighting us. They are erasing us. The Emperor remained shrouded in his shadows at the head of the chamber, but his voice carried a new quality, something none of the council members had heard before. Uncertainty. Send envoys. Open communication channels. Offer negotiations. We will return their people, withdraw from their territories, provide reparations. Whatever they demand, we will discuss terms. Thexoran's head snapped toward the Emperor, disbelief evident despite his alien features. My lord, we cannot show weakness. If we negotiate now, every subject species will see it as vulnerability. Rebellions will ignite across the Empire. Our authority will collapse. Our authority is already collapsing, the Emperor replied coldly. We have lost 47 worlds in 3 weeks. If this continues, there will be no empire left to rebel against. Initiate contact. Immediately. The Empire's most skilled diplomats were dispatched, broadcasting on every frequency, using every communication method known to galactic civilization. They sent messages of peace, offers of restitution, promises of justice for past wrongs. They invoked ancient laws of war, appealed to reason and mercy, offered territorial concessions and material wealth beyond measure. Humanity's response came not through words, but through action. The diplomatic convoy, traveling under flags of truce and broadcasting their peaceful intentions, was intercepted at the edge of human-controlled space. The ships were not destroyed. Instead, they were sent back to Imperial territory with their crews unharmed but fundamentally changed. Every diplomat, every crew member, every being aboard those vessels returned with the same modification, a device fused to their neural systems, impossible to remove without killing the host. Through these devices, humanity delivered their response. The voice was not the calm, neutral tone of the first transmission. This voice carried the weight of 17 million dead, the anger of 50 years of preparation, and the absolute certainty of beings who had transcended their former limitations. You want to negotiate? You murdered our children and now seek mercy? You enslaved our people and now request dialogue? We gave you one warning, one opportunity. You responded with mockery and military force. That door is closed. There will be no negotiation. There will be no compromise. There will be no surrender accepted. You will experience what you inflicted upon countless species for 7,000 years. Your worlds will burn. Your fleets will shatter. Your empire will fall. And when it is over, when your civilization is nothing but ash and memory, perhaps the galaxy will finally know peace. This is not vengeance. This is extinction. The device is deactivated, leaving the diplomats alive but traumatized, carriers of humanity's absolute refusal to show mercy. The message was clear. The time for words had passed before the war even began. The Empire watched in mounting horror as humanity demonstrated the full extent of their transformed capabilities. They deployed weapons that existed beyond conventional understanding. Technologies that seemed like magic to even the Empire's most advanced scientists. Quantum destabilizers were unleashed on military shipyards, devices that caused matter to exist in superposition states until entire structures simply phased out of reality. Fortress worlds protected by shields that could withstand sustained bombardment for years found their defenses meaningless as human weapons bypassed the barriers entirely, striking targets through dimensional pathways that ignored conventional space. But the most terrifying weapons were the star killers. Humanity had learned to manipulate stellar physics with precision that bordered on the divine. They could accelerate a star's fusion process, causing it to burn through its fuel in hours rather than billions of years, forcing premature supernovas. They could inject strange matter into stellar cores, collapsing stars into black holes that consumed everything in their gravitational wells. They could simply switch off nuclear fusion entirely, as they had done to Kelthera Seer, leaving worlds to freeze in permanent darkness. The Empire's core worlds, those closest to the throne world of Azkarath, began evacuating. Trillions of beings fled in panic, overwhelming transportation networks crushing each other in desperate attempts to escape the human advance. The Empire's subject species saw their opportunity. Rebellions erupted on hundreds of worlds, species that had been enslaved for centuries rising up against their imperial oppressors, while the Dominion's military forces were being systematically destroyed. The galaxy was fragmenting, and at the center of the chaos was humanity, advancing with mechanical precision toward the Empire's heart. Grand Admiral Thexoran made one final attempt at military resistance. He gathered every remaining warship in the Empire, stripping worlds of their defenses, abandoning entire sectors to consolidate power. He assembled a fleet of 10,000 vessels, the largest concentration of military might the Empire had ever deployed in a single location. It represented the absolute pinnacle of imperial power, the full strength of 7,000 years of conquest and technological development. Thexoran positioned this fleet in the Azkarath system itself, creating a defensive sphere around the throne world. Every weapon was charged, every shield was at maximum power, every crew member was ready to die defending the Empire's core. If humanity wanted the throne world, they would have to break through this wall of steel and fire. The human fleet arrived at the edge of the system 3 days later. They did not match the Empire's numbers. There were perhaps 1,000 human vessels, dark shapes that bent light around them, ships that seemed to exist partially out of phase with normal reality. They did not rush forward to engage. They simply stopped at the system's outer boundary and waited. For hours, nothing happened. The Imperial fleet remained in defensive formation, weapons trained on the human vessels waiting for the attack to begin. Thexoran stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical displays with predatory focus. He knew the Empire was likely doomed, but he would make humanity pay for every inch of space, every world they claimed. If this was the end, he would ensure it was an end written in blood. Then the human ships activated their final weapon. Space itself began to tear. Not metaphorically, but literally. The fabric of reality started developing fissures, cracks in existence that spread like fractures in glass. Through these cracks, something else became visible, a roiling chaos of energy and impossible geometry, a realm that existed beyond the boundaries of the normal universe. The human vessels began pulling the Azkarath system into that other place. Imperial ships tried to flee, but the dimensional boundary expanded faster than they could move. Vessels caught in the expanding field began experiencing catastrophic failures as the laws of physics around them changed. Ships designed for normal space found themselves operating in an environment where gravity worked differently, where energy behaved in alien ways, where the fundamental forces that held matter together no longer applied in familiar patterns. Warships imploded or exploded as their power cores reacted to impossible physics. Shields collapsed. Weapons discharged randomly. Crew members perished as their biological processes failed in an environment their evolution had never prepared them for. In minutes, the 10,000-ship fleet was reduced to debris and screaming wrecks, their hulls twisted into shapes that hurt to perceive, their structures folded through dimensions that should not exist. Thexoran watched his fleet die from the bridge of his flagship, the vessel shaking violently as it was pulled toward the dimensional rift. In his final moments he understood. Humanity had not simply advanced their technology. They had transcended the limitations of their reality. They had become something that operated on a level the Empire could never reach. Beings that could reshape existence itself according to their will. His last thought before his ship was torn apart was simple. We should never have attacked them. The throne world of Azkarath was the final target. The planet was ancient, beautiful, a world of soaring architecture and carefully cultivated ecosystems. It had been the center of the Empire for 7,000 years, home to 40 billion beings, the seat of power from which countless worlds had been conquered and subjugated. Humanity's fleet materialized in orbit around Azkarath in perfect formation. They did not bombard the world. They did not deploy ground forces. Instead, they broadcast one final transmission, this time directly into the mind of every being on the planet's surface, a message that bypassed all technology and spoke directly to consciousness itself. This is humanity. 50 years ago, your empire destroyed our colonies and murdered 17 million of our people. You did this without warning, without provocation, without mercy. You believed we were weak. You believed we would submit or perish. You were wrong. We promised you that your worlds would burn if you did not meet our demands. You chose to ignore that warning. Now you face the consequence of that choice. What happens next is not cruelty. It is justice. Remember this moment. Remember what happens when you attack those who wish only to be left in peace. The Emperor stood in his throne room, surrounded by guards and advisors who could do nothing to save him. He was ancient, powerful, a being who had ruled with absolute authority for 2 millennia. He had ordered the deaths of trillions, had crushed hundreds of civilizations, had built an empire that spanned the stars. Now he faced his own extinction, delivered by a species he had dismissed as insignificant primitives. He did not plead. He did not beg. He simply stood and waited for the end. Humanity's weapon activated. It was not explosive, not kinetic, not even energy-based in any conventional sense. It was something far more fundamental. The human ships began unraveling the quantum bonds that held matter together on Azkarath. The process started at the atomic level and cascaded upward. Buildings dissolved into component molecules, then atoms, then subatomic particles, then pure energy. Living beings experienced the same fate, their bodies breaking down painlessly but absolutely, consciousness fading as the very particles that formed their thoughts ceased to exist as discrete entities. The entire world, 40 billion lives, 7,000 years of history and culture, dissolved in a matter of hours. When the process was complete, there was nothing left but dispersed energy and elementary particles spreading through the void. The throne world of the Galactic Dominion Empire simply ceased to exist. The human fleet departed without comment, leaving behind only empty space where a planet had once orbited. The war ended, not with a treaty or a surrender, but with the complete dissolution of imperial authority. The Empire's remaining worlds declared independence or were liberated by their subject populations. The species that had been enslaved for centuries rose up and reclaimed their freedom. The galaxy fractured into thousands of independent systems and coalitions, free for the first time in millennia from the Dominion's crushing rule. Humanity made one final broadcast to the galaxy. The message was brief, delivered in the same neutral tone as their original warning. To all species of this galaxy, the Galactic Dominion Empire no longer exists. Their fleets are destroyed. Their worlds are freed and their leadership is dead. We took this action not as conquerors, but as beings defending our right to exist. We did not seek this war. We did not desire this destruction. But when our families were murdered and our people were enslaved, we chose to respond with absolute force. Let this be a lesson that echoes across the stars. Humanity will not be your enemy if you leave us in peace. We will trade with you, share knowledge with you, and coexist peacefully with any species that approaches us with respect. But if you attack us, if you murder our innocent, if you seek to enslave or destroy us, we will respond with total annihilation. We have the power to end civilizations. We choose not to use it unless forced. Do not force us. We are returning to our space now. We will not expand beyond our borders. We will not seek empire or dominion. We ask only to be left alone. Respect that wish and there will be peace between us. Violate it, and you will share the Empire's fate. This is humanity's promise to the galaxy. The human fleet vanished, returning to their territory beyond the galactic rim. They sealed their borders with technology that made approach impossible. creating a barrier that could not be breached or bypassed. They shared no details of how they had achieved their transformation, no explanations of their impossible weapons, no insights into the science that had elevated them beyond conventional understanding. The galaxy was left to rebuild in the aftermath of the Empire's fall. Freed species established new governments, formed alliances, and began the slow process of healing from millennia of oppression. Historians and scholars studied the war, analyzing every engagement, trying to understand how humanity had achieved what they had achieved. Some theorized that humans had discovered ancient technology, artifacts left by a precursor civilization that had existed before the current galactic cycle. Others believed humanity had made contact with extra-dimensional beings and gained knowledge from beyond normal reality. A few suggested that humans had simply evolved differently, that their biology or psychology contained some quality that allowed them to progress in ways other species could not. The truth remained unknown. Humanity kept their secrets, and no species dared approach their territory to demand answers. The sealed borders remained impenetrable, a clear message that humanity's warning was eternal and absolute. In the years that followed, the war became legend. Stories spread across the galaxy of the species that had been attacked by an empire and responded by destroying that empire completely. Parents told their children tales of humanity's vengeance, using it as a lesson about the dangers of cruelty and the importance of leaving peaceful species in peace. Military academies studied the war as an example of how quickly conventional power could become obsolete when faced with paradigm-shifting innovation. A memorial was built on the ruins of Kelthera 4, the frozen world that had been the first to fall. Representatives from hundreds of freed species contributed to its construction, creating a monument to the 17 million humans whose deaths had sparked the war, and to the billions who had died in the conflict that followed. The memorial's inscription was simple, written in every known language. Here lies a warning to all who would commit atrocity. There is always a reckoning. Humanity never responded to the memorial's construction, never acknowledged the gesture, never emerged from their self-imposed isolation. They had delivered their message to the galaxy in the most absolute terms possible. They had demonstrated their power, executed their justice, and withdrawn. Whether they still possessed the weapons they had deployed, whether they continued to advance beyond already incomprehensible levels, whether they would ever return to the galactic stage, these questions remained unanswered. But every species in the galaxy understood one fundamental truth. Somewhere beyond the galactic rim in their sealed territory, humanity waited. They were not conquerors. They were not empire builders. They were simply beings who wished to be left alone. But if provoked, if attacked, if pushed beyond the boundaries of patience, they would respond with a fury that could end civilizations. The Galactic Dominion Empire had learned that lesson in the most brutal way imaginable. Their worlds had burned. Their fleets had shattered. Their empire had dissolved. They had believed humanity was weak, and that belief had cost them everything. The galaxy would not make that mistake again. Humanity's final warning echoed across the stars, a promise and a threat that would endure for millennia. Leave them in peace and peace would reign. Threaten them and face annihilation. It was a simple bargain, clearly stated, absolutely enforced. And in the silence of their isolated space, humanity waited, their impossible weapons ready, their transformed civilization watching the galaxy with patient vigilance. They had shown what they were capable of when pushed to war. They hoped never to demonstrate it again, but if necessary they would. Without hesitation, without mercy, without limit. That was humanity's legacy to the galaxy. Not as heroes or villains, but as a force of nature, beautiful in peace, terrible in war, and absolutely uncompromising when their survival was at stake. The final warning had been delivered. The galaxy had witnessed its truth, and the stars themselves seemed to remember.